chant together. Om Bhadram Karnebhih Shrunuyama Devaah Bhadram Nebhih Shrunuyama Devaah Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraah Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraah Sthirarangaihi stuštuvagam sastanubihi Sthirarangaihi stuštuvagam sastanubihi Vyashema devahitam yadayuhu Vyashema devahitam yadayuhu Swasti nahindro vruddhashravah Swasti nahindro vruddhashravah Swasti nah pusha vishwavedah Swasti nah pusha vishwavedah Swasti nastarkshyo arishtanemihi Swasti nastarkshyo arishtanemihi Swasti no brahaspatir dadhatu Swasti no brahaspatir dadhatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. So we continue our study of this Kaivalya Upanishad, and we're in for some very wonderful teachings in the next series of verses. So far we've seen Ashvalayana, the rishi, come to Brahmaji and ask this most profound of questions: how to know Brahman, the reality because of which everything exists. Then in a previous class we saw the beginning of the instruction, which was so important. Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yogad Avaihi. Avaihi. Seek it, discover it, gain that Brahman. How? Through Shraddha, through Bhakti, and through Dhyana. We spent a better part of a class on that. When we see these three, Shraddha, Bhakti, and Dhyana, you might think, wait a minute, what about Shastra? What about Guru? Well, if you remember our discussion, Shraddha was in what? Shraddha, faith. Faith in what? Faith in Shastra and in Guru. So comes along as a package. These are some of the essential prerequisites for this very profound Vedantic spiritual inquiry to discover what is Brahman. And then there's one more requirement which didn't fit in this verse and got included in the next verse. The next verse, verse 3, we studied the first half of it. We'll see the rest of it in today's class. Let's begin by chanting it. I'm going to use the swaras that are found in the Mahanarayana Upanishad. This text has no swaras, but the same, this verse and the next one occurs in this other text, Mahanarayana Upanishad. We can use those swaras. Repeat after me. Na karmana, na karmana. Na prajaya dhanena, na prajaya dhan, tyagena tyagena, amritatvaman ashuhu, amritatvaman, parena nakan, nihitam guhayam, Viprajate, yat yatayo vishanti. So we saw the first half of this, but let's repeat it. Repeat it just to set the stage for today's discussion. How to discover Brahman? Na karmana, not through karma, here meaning Vedic rituals, not through rituals. Na prajaya, not through progeny, the rituals that can be done by progeny on your behalf after you're no longer here. So those kinds of rituals. will not help you discover Brahman. Na dhanena, not through wealth. Now remember, in this context, we're reading Vedas here, so dhana, wealth, you don't really think that the rishis would even imagine if you gain enough money, you can reach Brahman. That's not the idea at all, right? If you remember our discussion, we said you can use your wealth to hire lots of priests to do lots of rituals. So this is how it was understood in ancient times. This is an ancient text. So in ancient times, the prevailing wisdom was more rituals. And here, this verse just says, hey, these rituals are useless in leading you to discover Brahman, the source of all. Na karmana, na prajaya, na dhanena, then how? Eke sam amritam anashuhu. Some anashuhu, gained, enjoyed. Enjoyed what? Amritatvam, immortality. Some reached moksha, that state of immortality, discovering the reality of Brahman. How did they reach that condition? Tyagena, through tyaga. And this we discussed in our last class as well, renunciation. Tyaga means renunciation. But renunciation in the same way as we saw in the Isha Upanishad, tena tyaktena bhunjita. That is, renunciation not in the very limited sense of a lifestyle of renunciation, but in a more profound sense of turning your back on worldly pursuits, recognizing the limitations of worldly pursuits, and focusing instead on discovering that true source of fullness and completeness within. Turning your back on worldly pursuits doesn't necessarily mean giving up your job, giving up your family. It does mean, as we've discussed several times, a radical shift of orientation. What is most important to you? I think once I gave this example of a priority list. Do you ever have a to-do list? And then you put them in order of priority. The most important things you put at the top of your to-do list. The least important things go at the bottom. So tyaga in this context means to put Brahma Vidya as a number one item. That's what it means. Renunciation of everything else doesn't mean running away from everything else. It does mean the shift of orientation such that spiritual growth becomes your number one priority. Then the difference is, what about the lifestyle sannyasa? The difference is, for you, spiritual growth is your number one priority. Something else is number two, something else is number three, something else is number four. For the sannyasi by lifestyle, spiritual growth is number one, spiritual growth is number two, spiritual growth is number three, number four, etc., etc. That's the difference. All right, not that much difference. Okay. So we saw that much in the last class. Now, finding Brahman, where? We introduced this a little bit. Now we're going to see it real clearly. How will that Brahman be found? Where will that Brahman be found? This verse says it so clearly and simply. Start in the second line. Yat yatayaha. Yatayaha is plural. Yati is the singular. Yati is one who strives. That's the literal meaning of yati, one who strives. It's also meant for a sannyasi by lifestyle, but the literal meaning of yati is one who strives. So here, yatayaha, those who strive. Those who strive, vishanti, they enter into it, yat, into that one. They enter into Brahman. They not only reach it, vishanti, they enter it. You think, enter? What do you mean, enter? You'll see the rest of the verse. They enter it, nihitam guhayam. They enter it, which is nihitam, placed, located, abiding. Where? Guha. In the guha. Guhayam means in the guha. Guha means cave. In the cave? So this is how you discover Brahman. You have to go find a cave and Vishanti. Enter into that cave, which is why the Himalayas are such a popular place for this. There are lots of caves up there. You can find your own cave and move in. Guha, as most of you understand very well, in this context means this guha, the cave of the heart. And this is metaphor upon metaphor. Guha, cave, is a metaphor for heart. Heart is a metaphor for mind, buddhi. Honestly, this is a two-level metaphor. Guha, cave, represents heart. Heart represents mind, the place where all experience takes place. So that which is nihitam guhayam, that which is abiding in the cave of the heart, means that which is present in your mind. We said before that we made this comment in the last class, how to find that Brahman, where to find that Brahman. You might remember my statement. I said, the only way Brahman will be discovered is as the truth of yourself. Brahman cannot be understood or discovered in any other way. Brahman can only be understood as the truth of yourself. That's what the Mahavakyas like Tattvamasi are all about. That, tat, that is only understood as tvam, as your true nature. Your true nature happens to be consciousness. That consciousness happens to be experientially present in your mind. Really speaking, consciousness is present throughout your body, but in a most immediate sense. It's present in experience in our mind. Therefore, nihitam guhayam, established in the mind as consciousness. Yatayaha vishanti, those who strive, enter into the cave of the heart, enter into the mind. Hey, it sounds like meditation. Guess what? Not the next verse, but the verse after that. All meditation. So we're going in that direction very rapidly. So you enter into the cave of the mind, because that's where consciousness abides in the most direct manner. And this abiding in the mind, you might think, that's it? I don't have to go to some holy place to discover Brahman. I don't have to go to the Himalayas, to Mount Kailash. This consciousness present in the mind here is said to be parena nakan. Now, parena here means beyond. Nakam is a very odd word. Not really a dictionary. You won't find it in a dictionary. It has an unusual derivation. The usual derivation is this. Kam means sukham. Very arbitrary. Kam represents sukham, happiness. Akam means not happiness. Dukham. If kam means sukham, akam means dukham. And then na akam means na dukham, which means sukham. It's a play on words. It's also a double negative, which grammar teachers say never use double negatives. They're used all the time. We have to be ready for that. So nakam then means absence of dukkha. That's a better definition. Nakam means absence of dukkha. Where is there the complete absence of dukkha? Not in this life, but in swarga, in heaven. In this way, nakam happens to mean swarga, heaven. Without a commentary, no one would figure that out. So if you find it a little mysterious, it is. That's why we have commentaries. So parena nakam then means beyond heaven. That which is present in the mind is said here to be beyond heaven. we're going to be discussing quite a bit in future verses, the nature of consciousness, Chaitanya, that consciousness which is present in your mind isn't stuck inside your head. That consciousness which is present behind your thoughts, behind your emotions, behind your memories, etc., that consciousness happens to be all-pervasive. We're going to discuss this and establish this more clearly. But with that in mind, all-pervasive consciousness is certainly beyond all lokas, including beyond heaven. So parena nakan, that which lies beyond heaven, but that which is in the cave of the heart. Nice poetry, and this is poetry. It is close, yet it is far. We've heard language like that before in Isha Upanishad. Here, it is that which is closest to you in the cave of the heart, the consciousness in your own mind, yet it is parena nakam, beyond heaven. Nice poetry. And it is vibrajate, that which shines. That vibrajate, shining in the cave of the heart. Shining means consciousness, right? What is it that reveals your thoughts? One of our most common modes of understanding the relationship between thought and consciousness, vritti and consciousness, is your vrittis, your mental events, are known to you how? And what we say is they are illumined by the light of consciousness. It's a metaphor, but an extremely basic and helpful metaphor. Whatever happens in your mind is illumined by the consciousness which is yourself, your true nature. You know your thoughts. How? You illumine your thoughts. The light of consciousness illumines your thoughts. So therefore, vibrajate, it shines. Nihitam guhayam, in the cave of the heart, in the mind. And parena nakan, that consciousness which is, even though it's in the cave of the heart, in your mind, it is even beyond heaven. It is that all-pervasive consciousness which happens to be non-different from Brahman. This is yet to be discovered, but this is the direction we're going here. So, the Brahman, and the final irony here, is the source of all, the source of the universe, the source of the cosmos, the source because of which all the planets and stars and galaxies exist. Where is that source discovered? Here. In your own, behind your own thoughts. Very cleverly hidden. Like hidden, we sometimes say hidden underneath a rock. In this case, it's not hidden underneath a rock. In this case, it's hidden behind your thoughts. Does that make sense? Not hidden under a rock. Hidden behind your thoughts. Behind meaning on the other side of your thoughts. Thoughts are on the outside. Who's on the inside? You are. You as a conscious being, Chidatma. So this is the direction we're going. Okay. We'll go to the next verse, which is also found in this verse actually is found not only in that Mahanarayana Upanishad, with the swaras that we'll chant, it's also found in the Mundaka Upanishad. Many times verses in one Upanishad are found in another. Some verses in Upanishad are actually found in Bhagavad Gita. There are several verses from the Katha Upanishad, which are found in Bhagavad Gita, so we shouldn't be surprised when we see that. So let's see the fourth verse. Repeat after me, please. Vedanta Vijnana, Vedanta Vijnana, Sunishchitartha, Sunishchitartha, Sannyasa Yogad, Sannyasa Yogad, Yataya Shuddha Sattvaha, Yataya Shuddha Sattvaha, Te Brahma Lokeshu, Te Brahma Lokeshu, Paranta Kale, parantakale paramrita paramrita parimuchanti sarve parimuchanti sarve. To introduce this verse, suppose with your Shraddha, Bhakti, and Dhyana and Tyaga, all four of these, suppose you are searching in your guha, in your own cave. Searching in your cave means, in meditation, looking behind your thoughts. This kind of inward-turned, introspective inquiry. Atma vichara, self-inquiry. Suppose, even with Shraddha, Bhakti, Dhyana, and Tyaga, the prerequisites, you can be engaged in this inquiry, in this search, looking within, looking behind your thoughts, and you might not be successful. Possible. Those who are successful, amritaha anashuhu. The prior verse said, they gain immortality, they become enlightened. What about those who fail in their attempt? Those who are not quite successful. Meaning, they have Shraddha, Bhakti, Dhyana, and Tyaga. They have all the prerequisites. Further, they're also yati. They're also striving very hard. But in spite of their striving, they fall somewhat short. If you remember in the Isha Upanishad, we introduced a concept called krama mukti. And we differentiated it from Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti. Let's just review that topic very briefly, because it'll introduce this verse. We've said that Jivan Mukti means to be free here and now. Jivan eva, while living. Right now, Mukti, free, utterly free, moksha. Then Videha Mukti is a condition of freedom that persists after the body falls. So if you have Jivan Mukti now, when your body falls, then it becomes Videha Mukti, which is to say that the Mukti is unaffected by the absence of the body. Really speaking, Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti are the same, because the only difference is the presence or absence of the body, which is trivial. Then we introduced, in our discussion of the Isha Upanishad, we introduced this concept of krama mukti. This concept is not universally held. It's a matter of belief. There are some scriptures which accept it, some scriptures which deny it. Here we're dealing with scriptures which accept it. And what it describes is you come so close to moksha, you come so close to that discovery, but you fall ever so slightly short. But all that effort can't be wasted. Sri Krishna says so in, I think, chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, that when you make an effort to reach moksha, no effort is ever wasted. So there's a doctrine that teaches, if you've made so much effort and you just barely fall short of making that discovery, what's taught is, with so much effort and so much punya, so much blessings, good karma that you receive from your intensely spiritual life, you should definitely go to Swarga, heaven. Not just any heaven, but you go to Brahmaloka. This is the doctrine of Krama Mukti. Based on the intensity of your lifelong spiritual pursuit, after dying, you reach Brahmaloka, and you remain in Brahmaloka until the end of the kalpa, until the universe undergoes dissolution. And when the universe undergoes dissolution, then you become mukta, you become freed at that time. This is a doctrine called Krama Mukti. And the reason for explaining that is, this verse happens to talk about Krama Mukti. The prior verse described Jivan Mukti, because it said, Eke amritatvam anashuhu. Eke, some rishis who actually made that discovery, Anashuhu, they enjoyed amritatvam, immortality, which in this context means moksha, mukti. So the prior verse is talking about jivan mukti. The current verse, verse 4, is talking about krama mukti. Let's see how krama mukti is described here. Vedanta vijnana sunishchitartaha. That's one word, one long compound word. And the best way to get the meaning of these compound words is to read them right to left. That's the rule. So, artha, meaning. Those for whom the meaning of the Mahavakya, Tattvamasi, etc., those for whom the meaning of Mahavakyas is sunishchita, is very well ascertained. Those for whom the meaning of Mahavakyas is very well ascertained, the artha, meaning of Mahavakyas, is sunishchita, very well ascertained, and they have gained vijnana, very clear knowledge of what? Of Vedanta. Vedanta vijnana, clear knowledge of Vedanta. Now, when you hear an expression like that, they've ascertained the meaning of the Mahavakya, and they have clear understanding of Vedanta. Then why aren't they enlightened? They understand the Mahavakya. They have a clear understanding of Vedanta. Wait a minute. Do you understand what the words tat, tvam, and asi mean? Yeah. So you understand the meaning of Mahavakya. You also understand a lot of Vedanta. It's possible, and even likely, to understand Mahavakya and have this Vedanta Vijnana, very clear knowledge of Vedanta, and still be unenlightened. Why? What's lacking? Vedanta Vijnana is present. Brahma Vijnana is missing. Brahma Jnana, knowledge of Brahman. Why do we meet here on Tuesday nights? Is it, you've heard me, this is one of my favorite pet peeves. We're not coming here to study Vedanta. And if we're studying Vedanta, we're wasting our times, because the subject matter that we're pursuing is not Vedanta. Vedanta is scripture. What we're pursuing is Brahman. If we're pursuing Vedanta, we're wasting our time. If we're pursuing Brahman, we're on the right track. So here, Vedanta Vijnana refers to those who are scholars in Vedanta, those for whom the meaning of Mahavakyas is very well understood, but those who have yet to personally make the discovery in a very clear way. But they're really trying. They are described here as yatayaha. In the middle of the second line, there's a word again. Yati, one who strives. In the plural number, yatayaha. So they are striving. How are they striving? Sannyasa yogat. Through sannyasa and yoga. Or better to say through the yoga of sannyasa. Through the practice of sannyasa. Sannyasa, again, doesn't mean lifestyle. It means tyaga, as we saw in a prior verse. Sannyasa yoga, through the practice of sannyasa, through the practice of turning your attention away from worldly pursuits that culminate in limited enjoyments, turning your attention instead towards purely spiritual pursuits, towards Brahman in particular. So those yatayaha, those yatis, who sannyasa yogat, through the practice of sannyasa, that reorientation of their attitude towards the world, they become shuddha sattvaha. Shuddha sattva. Here the word sattva doesn't have anything to do with sattva guna. Well, only in an obscure way it has a relationship to sattva guna. In this usage it means mind. In the expression shuddha sattva, it means one whose mind is purified. It's a common Vedantic expression. If you wonder how can sattva mean mind, the mind is called sattva guna pradhana. It's primarily sattva guna. The body is primarily tamoguna. The prana is primarily rajoguna. But the mind is primarily sattva guna. So since mind is sattva guna pradhana, primarily sattva guna, here the word sattva refers to mind. So shuddha sattvaha, those whose minds have been purified. How have their minds been purified? Sannyasa yoga, through this whole spiritual pursuit. And what happens to them? So they have been pursuing these teachings. They have Shraddha, Bhakti, Dhyana, and Tyaga. They have all the prerequisites. They are yatis. They're striving very hard. They become purified. They understand the teachings of Vedanta and the Mahavakya very clear, but they fall very slightly short of the goal. What happens to them? They, Brahmalokeshu, in Brahmaloka, para antakale. Antakala means the final time. Para antakala means the absolute final time. Antakala, the final time, means before 9 o'clock this class comes to an anta. This class comes to an end. But that's not the final end time. So para anta, the absolute final kala time, means the time of dissolution of the universe. So, Brahmaloke, in Brahmaloka, para antakale, at the end of time, when the universe comes to an end, te, those people, those sarve, the very last word, all of them, parimuchyanti, all of them become utterly free. Parimuchyanti, they all become utterly free. They are all para amritaha. They are all absolutely immortal. So having reached Brahmaloka, at the end of time, when the dissolution of the universe comes about, they become parimuchyanti, they are utterly freed. This is the doctrine of krama mukti. So prior verse was jivan mukti. This verse is krama mukti. All of it as a result of Shraddha, Bhakti, Dhyana, and Tyaga. All right. So, having discussed that in the last two verses, Mukti, now we're going to turn to Dhyana, meditation. The next two verses are on meditation and extremely profound. I love these verses. So let us proceed. Verse 5. Vivikta deshecha, vivikta desh, sukhasanastaha, shuchi samagriva, shiras shariram, antyashramastaha, Sakalendriyani, virudhya bhaktya, swagurum pranamya. So, dhyana is our topic, and this verse is preparation for meditation. Verse 6, then, is the actual performance of meditation. Here we're discussing, in verse 5, preparation for meditation. Why preparation? Vivikta deshe. In a desha, in a place which is vivikta, set aside, in a quiet place, means a place where you won't be disturbed. That place where you won't be disturbed could conceivably be your living room when no one's home. It could even be in your car. If you're not driving, if you're driving, you can be disturbed. It just means a place where you won't be disturbed. It doesn't mean you have to go away to some cave in the Himalayas. It means, however, a place where you won't be disturbed, in a place that, literally it says, in a place that's set aside. Then what do you do in that place that's set aside? Sukhasanastaha. Staha, sitting. Sitting how? In Sukhasana. Actually, Sukhasana is one of the many asanas that are practiced. The asanas that are practiced are not all the twisting asanas. There's Shirasasana, standing on your head. Sukhasana is pretty much the way I'm sitting right now. It simply means a comfortable seated posture. That's all it means. Sukha means comfortable. Sukhasana is a comfortable seated posture. Why comfortable? You may have heard me joke in a meditation class. If you twist your legs up in Padmasana, most people find that fairly uncomfortable. If you sit like that for a long time, it can become quite painful. If you're trying to meditate, sitting for a long time in this Padmasana, what are you going to be meditating upon? The pain in your legs. Exactly. Which is why even Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras, he says, Sthira Sukham Asanam. He says your posture for meditation should be sthira, firm, and sukha, comfortable. And that's also suggested here by this word. Sukhasana staha. So staha, sitting, be abiding in sukhasana, in a comfortable, stable position. One who is shuchihi, purified. Purified means what? We use these kinds of terms all the time. Shuddha sattva in the prior verse, one whose mind is purified. Here, shuchi, one who is pure. External purity is the easy part. It's so easy. You go into a shower with some soap and you're pure. That's the easy part. The inner purity is the tough part. It's really tough. With children, I joke, what will you do you purify your body with soap? I ask them, what will you do to purify yourself inside? And children love jokes. I say, what will you try to get some soap inside, maybe through your ear, and try to purify the insides? Inner purity means what? A mind free from distractions. What kinds of distractions? How about worry about the future? Regret about the past? Hurt? Anger? Frustration? These are all impurities. We can we can come up with a long list of mental impurities. Worry, I just started. Worry, regret, anger, frustration, jealousy, hurt, and you can add on as many as you want. Shuchi here means the absence of all of those. Why is it important? They're all obstacles to meditation. If your mind is being drawn into the past or future, if you're struggling with hurt or frustration or some other emotional issue, all of that is an obstacle to meditation. So here, shuchihi, one who's freed from all those obstacles. And some further instruction. Sama, griva, shiras, shariraha. Very similar to some Bhagavad Gita instruction. One whose griva, shiras, and sharira are sama. Sama here doesn't mean, sama can mean same. Here it means in a line, lined up, equal, lined up equally. What is lined up equally? Your shiras, your head, your griva, your neck, and your sharira, the rest of your body. Which means you're sitting straight. You're not leaning back, you're not leaning forward, you're not listing to the port or starboard, as our boating people like to say. So, sama, griva, shira, shariraha, sitting properly in a stable position. Further instructions. This is a little interesting. Antya ashramastaha. One who is staha, abiding in Antya ashrama, the last ashrama. Now, we're studying Vedas, so Vedic usage of the word ashrama is very specific. So the four chaturashrama, brahmacharya, the student life, grahastha, the married life, vanaprashta, retired life, and what is the antya ashrama? The last ashrama is sannyasa. Uh-oh. You will find here and in many texts there are strong words of encouragement for the adoption of sannyasa as a lifestyle. But the fact that it's called antya ashrama also suggests that it's an ashrama taken at the end of your life. That is, once you've finished everything else, including you've finished your studies, brahmacharya, you've finished raising your family, grahastha, and you've finished retirement. Now you're thinking, I'm waiting for it to start. Okay. You start your retirement, vanaprashta, but even that vanaprashta can come to an end. And that's what's being discussed here. Sannyasa as a lifestyle simply means a lifestyle exclusively dedicated to spiritual growth. That definition, by the way, means it doesn't require diksha, it doesn't require initiation and taking robes and taking a name and going through all the rituals and all of that. That's not necessarily implied in this antyashrama. Antyashrama, the last stage of life, then, sannyasa, means a life dedicated to spiritual growth exclusively. And the key word here is exclusively. There are no other concerns. So when you're a student, your concerns are study. When you're a grahastha, your concerns are family. When you're in vanaprashta, presumably you're there with your spouse. So there's still concern for others. And realistically speaking, there's concern for adult children as well. So here, antyashrama means a condition in which your only concern is spiritual growth and nothing else. So that's what's described here. Antyashramastaha, being established in that last stage of life, sannyasa, sakala indriyani nirudhya. Nirudhya, having restrained. Indriyani, senses. Sakala, all of them. Having restrained all of one's senses. And this is not in terms of lifestyle, this is in terms of meditation. When we talk about restraining your senses, we're not talking about avoiding dessert. Sometimes it means that. Sometimes restraining your senses means avoiding dessert. Here, it means withdrawing your senses. Pratyahara is a word that Patanjali uses in his Yoga Sutras. Nirudhya, controlling or withdrawing. Sakala indriyani, all of your senses, which means your attention is withdrawn from the world around you. Your attention is focused within. This is a preliminary step in meditation. What's being given are the steps. Patanjali gives his ashta anga, his 8 steps, his 8 limbs. And what we're getting here is an abbreviated form of those 8 steps or 8 limbs of meditation. So, then what comes next? Oh, the next one is not in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. This is very interesting. So, what is included here in preparation for meditation is what? Bhaktya Swagarum Pranamya. Swagarum, your own teacher, Pranamya, having bowed, Bhaktya, with devotion. Interesting. It's significant. It doesn't say having bowed to Bhagavan with devotion. It says having bowed to one's own guru with devotion. Why? This is a pursuit. the meditation that's going to be described in the very next verse is Nirguna Brahma Upasana, which I'll describe in some detail when we get there. It is not a prayerful meditation. It is not a meditation on Ishvara. Brahman, after all, is a reality because of which Ishvara exists. There's going to be a meditation later, a couple of verses later, we're going to see a meditation which is on Ishvara, a devotional meditation. But the meditation that's being introduced is not a devotional meditation. It's a meditation on the absolute reality because of which everything exists. That reality, which we call Brahman, is not an object of prayer. You cannot pray to Brahman because Brahman is not a being. Brahman is that because of which all beings exist. Brahman is that because of which Ishvara exists. Therefore, this Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, is not an object of prayer. That's why it says not having Bhagavantam pranamya, having bowed to Bhagavan. It doesn't say. It says Swagurum pranamya, bowing to your Guru, bhaktya, with devotion. Why Guru? The meditation that's going to be introduced in the next verse is this inward-turned investigation to discover in your, as I said before, hidden behind your thoughts, Brahman. For any kind of inquiry, any kind of search, any kind of journey, you need guidance. For this kind of inward-turn journey, for that search, you need some guidance. Where does that guidance come from? Ultimately, it comes from Shastra. But Shastra, scripture, is pretty hard to understand without Guru. So therefore, in a more direct sense, your directions for what you're going to search for what you're going to meditate upon, the directions are coming from Swagurum, your own Guru. Therefore, for those reasons, it says, Swagurum, pranamya, having bowed to your own Guru, bhaktya, with meditation. All of that is preparation. Preparation for what? That's what we see in the next verse. Hrit pundarikam, virajam vishuddham, vichantya madhye, vishadam vishokam, achantyam avyaktam, anantarupam, shivam prashantam, amritam brahmayonim. So, meditate on what? And this description is brilliant. This is just, you won't find a better passage in any scripture describing this process of looking within. In the second line, vichintya madhye. Vichintya literally means inquiring. That's the literal meaning of the word. Inquiring. It's meditation that's being described. But the fact that the word that's used is to inquire, to investigate. Vichintya. To investigate, to inquire. I'll extend the meaning a little bit, to search. Doesn't mean to search, but that's like an implied meaning. Vichintya, to investigate, to inquire, to search, to look within, to look. To look where? Madhye. In the middle means inside, within. Madhye. In between. Oh, that's good. Well, This is a big verse. We're not going to get through it tonight, so let's take some time with it. It's perhaps one of the most important in the entire text, so we'll take some time with it. To vichintya madhye, to look in between. To look in between what? Well, I've hinted already several times, hidden behind your thoughts. In fact, hidden between your thoughts. And I'm not being metaphoric. I'm being literal right now. You're inquiring into something hidden between your thoughts. After the end of one thought and before the beginning of the next thought. Well, what is present? Madhye, in the middle. After the end of one thought and before the beginning of the next thought, what's present is nothing. No thoughts. No thoughts, no mind. No mind, no experience of the world around you. What's present is only you, your true nature, your swarupa. Now, this idea of madhye, in between, is so. There was a nice question before class about dhyana when we introduced it in that vakya, Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yoga. There we described dhyana, meditation. We described a preliminary form of meditation in which you turn your mind towards an object of meditation and you have an uninterrupted flow of identical thoughts about the object of meditation. And to put it in simple terms, suppose your object of meditation is a mantra. We'll take a short mantra to make it easy. Om Namah Shivaya. So you're chanting Om Namah Shivaya. Generally, our mind will wander from topic to topic to topic, from one thing to another. But when you're really practicing meditation nicely, your mind is focused on Om Namah Shivaya. So in your mind comes a vritti, Om Namah Shivaya, which is followed by another vritti, Om Namah Shivaya, which is followed by yet another vritti, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, without interruption. This is dhyana. This is exactly how Patanjali describes dhyana, as this uninterrupted flow of identical vrittis. Now, suppose we investigate the gap between mantras. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Where's the gap? Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. You can create, in meditation, you can create gaps between repetitions of the mantra. And if you've acquired the skill sufficiently, you can enjoy a moment of profound silence in that gap between mantras. Madhye, in between, in the middle, in between two mantras, is a moment of utter silence. That's when you've gained that skill. It's not that hard to do. It takes some dedication, but you can do it. Definitely you can do it. So here, vichintya madhye, inquiring into the middle, into that gap, madhye. Inquiring where? Hrit pundarikam. Another nice metaphor. In the pundarika is lotus. Hrit pundarika, the lotus heart. Now, this is not sometimes when you see an expression like lotus heart, there's references to these chakras that are part of the system of Kundalini Yoga. This text has no connection whatsoever to that tradition. There are some Upanishads which go into it in great detail, not this one. So here, this Hrit Pundarika has nothing to do with any chakra. It simply is an expression for heart, lotus heart. But heart, as we said before, was a metaphor for mind. So just like the guha, the cave of the heart, meant mind, here the lotus heart also means mind. When we say mind, maybe better to say seat of experience. It's actually a more experiential way of putting it. Where does experience take place? All of Vedanta is an inquiry into experience. Where does experience take place? It doesn't take place in your little finger. In fact, if you have an experience of your little finger, where does that experience take place? Not in the finger. It's conveyed to your mind. All experience takes place in the mind. So here, Hrit Pundarikam, the lotus heart, it means mind. All right. Now, we're just going to hint at this, and we're going to wrap up. It would be nice to begin our next class with a very deep, very full explanation of this. But I'd like to point out all the terms describing what you're going to find. What will you find in that gap between mantras? Nothing. And that's what the text says. A whole series of words which mean nothing. But they say nothing like this. Absence of this, absence of that. Absence of this, absence of that. Look at the text. We'll just get an overview today. It says, what you're going to discover, vichintya madhye, inquiring in between the mantras, and that silent gap between mantras, what you'll discover is virajam, free from rajas, free from any impurity, without impurity. Vishuddham also means without impurity. Vishadam means clear. Clear in the sense of transparent. Transparent means colorless. Vishadam. We'll see these words in more detail in our next class. Vishokam, without sorrow. Notice every word is describing an absence. Virajam, without rajas. Vishuddham, without impurity. Vishadam, without color. Vishokam, without sorrow. Achintyam, without thought. Avyaktam, without manifestation. Again, we'll see the words in more detail in the next class. Ananta rupam. That word ananta is a negative word, right? Anta means end, boundary, limit. Ananta. Without limit, without end, without edge. These words are all negative. Then a couple of positive words are included at the end just to help us out. Shivam, Prashantam, Amritam. We'll see those words as well. But notice, by and large, this verse describes what you discover using negative language. You've heard something like that before. You've heard it said, neti, neti, na iti. Na iti means not this, not this, not this. That's what we're seeing here. How to negate all mental activities. Well, that's why it says, vichintya madhye. You inquire during that gap between mantras and you observe what is absent, and then having recognized, observed is not the right word. You recognize what is absent, and then you recognize what is present. And this will be our subject matter for the next class. So in that gap between vrittis, between thoughts, the only thing left is you as Satchidananda Atma. Not you, the personality, not you with a body, mind, and profession, and house, and car, etc. Just the pure you, Satchidananda Atma. And in that gap, madhye, that gap between mantras, where there's utter silence, then you and you alone are present. You as Satchidananda, and you alone. Only that Atma is present. And that then is an opportunity to understand both who you truly are and also what is that Brahman the reality because of which everything exists. And as we've said several times before, the reality because of which everything exists is the reality because of which you exist. To discover Atma is to discover Brahman. They're not two separate discoveries. One is the other. Atma is Brahman. Tat is Tvam. They're not separate. Okay, and we'll see that. It's a wonderful verse. We'll save it for the next class. Allow me just for one moment. I just want to take a quick head count, as it were, to see if we can fit in the old call. 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. No. Still trying. For a class like this, the intimacy of the old hall is much nicer, but we'll be way too crowded, uncomfortable. So we'll continue to meet in this hall. We'll conclude tonight with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.